and here is our next section. We're not doing lesson 10.5. We're going to skip to 10.6 because 10.5 is very long. We will only do 10.5 on Wednesday, and we can get this done now for Monday. So this is called the quadratic formula. This is a wonderful thing. I just want to tell you, we've done a lot of factoring, and if you ever want to solve any problem with the power of 2, you can use the quadratic formula. It's a catch-all. It's magic. So here it is, and you will use it a lot in any upper level math. So if we have a quadratic equation in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c, the solutions are x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So while you write this down, it looks horrible. It's not. Actually, you will probably memorize it by the time you're done with your homework, believe it or not. Sorry about the dogs walking on the wood floor. Their nails go click, click, click. So welcome to my home. Anyway, back to the quadratic formula. All you have to do when you have your equation is take a, b, and c and plug it into the formula. And then we solve it, and we have the answer. So let's try it. Here's the first one. Solve 3x squared plus 5x equals 8. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is that the difference between the formula up here and our problem down here is that it's not equal to 0. So you have to have it equal to 0. We have to have our a squared term, our bx term, and our c term all together on one side. So I'm going to subtract 8. And now I can get down to business once I have 0 on this side. So here's my formula. I've got negative b. So here, b is 5. I'm going to write negative 5. Then I'm going to write plus or minus the square root. And b again is 5, so I'm going to put 5 squared minus 4. Now what's a? That's the number in front of x squared. So 4ac means they're all multiplied. See this up here, 4ac? That means 4 times a times c. So whatever a is, I'm going to put that in. That was 3. And c is negative 8. Don't forget the negatives. If you do this slowly enough, you'll get it. But you have to be careful with the details. We have to be careful with our positives and negatives. All right, so then down below, I've got 2 times a, and a again is 3. So now we're just going to simplify. So I've got negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, now I can start to work this out, what's under the square root. So 5 squared is 25, and 4 times 3 is 12, times 8, let's see, 12 times 8 is 16, carry the 1, 96. Okay, so I have a negative times a negative, so that becomes positive 96 over 6. Looks like a lot of writing, just keep going with it because it's going to just produce the answer. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root, 25 plus 96 is 121. Oh, I can shorten that. And it just so happens 121 is 11 squared. So I'm going to take the square root of 21 and put 11 in. So do you see there's a lot of writing, but every time it gets simpler. Now, I've got this plus or minus part in the middle here. That means I have two answers, which I already knew because I have a quadratic equation, meaning the power of 2. I have two solutions, so I'm going to split it up. I'm going to have negative 5 plus 11 over 6. That's 1. And I'm going to have negative 5 minus 11 over 6. So I have two answers I have to work out. So negative 5 plus 11 is 6 over 6, and that reduces to 1. And negative 5 and negative 11 is negative 16 over 6, and that becomes negative 8 over 3. So I have two answers, x equals 1 and x equals negative 8 over 3. With something like this, using magic x, we could use bottoms up, we would get that. It's hard, but this is the catch-all. And that's the answer. Okay, so we're going to keep going and do another one. Number 2, 2x squared minus 7 equals x. Hey, you guys, can you be quiet over there, please? I'm recording and it all can be heard. Thank you. I'm at home. I don't live alone, thankfully. Okay, so I'm going to subtract x this time. I have to have 0. So I have 2x squared minus x, minus 7 equals 0. Is everybody following me? So one way to make this easier, we can write what a is. A is 2, b is negative 1, and c is negative 7. Now when I do these problems, I always want to write the formula for a couple reasons. 1, it helps me to memorize it, and 2, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to go fast and forget it. So I just write it down. How long did that take me? About 5 to 10 seconds. It was pretty painless. Okay, so I'm going to put negative b in. So b is negative 1. So the opposite of that would be 1. Plus or minus b squared would be negative 1 squared. So I'll put that in. See, I'm taking my time. I'm showing my work, plugging in all of the numbers. This is something you must do because it's just easy, too easy to make a mistake. So a is 2 and c is negative 7 over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, so let's keep going. Looks like a mess. We're going to clean it up. All right. 1 times the square root. Now, negative 1 squared is 1. 4 times 2 is 8 times 7 is 56. And then I have a negative times a negative, which is a positive. I can shorten this over 4. See, it's getting better. So now I have 1 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 4. Now, that looks pretty hard. Magic X wouldn't work for this. Bottoms up wouldn't work for this. This is why we have the quadratic formula. Now, in the back of the book, they might have this answer or they might have a decimal. So I'm going to show you how to get the decimal. I'm going to split it up, and I'm going to have x equals 1 plus the square root of 57 over 4, and I'm going to have 1 minus the square root of 57 over 4, okay? Now I'm going to work it out. If you use your calculator, you'll find that the square root of 57 is actually, whoops, yeah, that's a plus, 7.55 over 4. and this would be minus. So I use my calculator here to get the book answer. I haven't decided what I'm going to do for the test yet, but I can tell you that if I saw that answer, I would accept it because I want to see whether you can use the formula, not a calculator. That is the point. Okay, so this becomes 8.55 over 4, which I'll just tell you is about 2.14. And this becomes negative 6.55 over 4. And that is negative 1.64 approximately. So you can see that when we want to factor something, the quadratic formula is great when they don't work out evenly. It's something we couldn't generate with Magic X. Okay, so I want you guys to try 2 on your own. So solve using the quadratic formula. Okay. And here's the first one. X squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. And 3n squared minus 5n equals negative 1. Okay, so now's a good time for you to pause the video and work these out yourself. I am just going to pause myself, but I'm not going to stop the video because that complicates things. So go ahead and work those out, and I'll start up in just a moment. Okay, so let's see how you did with those. I'm going to change colors because that makes it a little bit more interesting. Love colors. So we can work it out. Okay, so A is 1 here. B is negative 8. And C is 16. Okay, so I'm going to have negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC over 2A. And there's my formula. So I'm going to have 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16 over 2 times 1. I'll give you, well, you're looking at yours, so I'll just keep going. You've already done this. So we've got 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 64 over 2. Look at that. Look at under here. 64 over 6 minus 64, that's 0. So this is going to get real easy. So 8 plus 0, that's just 8 over 2. So I have 8 over 2. My answer is 4. There's only one answer. It's 4. Actually, you could factor this and you would get, if we go back up here, looking at the quadratic, you'd get x plus 4, x minus 4, x minus 4, so they're both just 4. All right, let's go to the next one. I don't have my equation in the right form, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Now I can say that A is 3, B is negative 5, and C is 1. Okay, I'm going to write down the formula so that I can copy it correctly and substitute correctly. All right, so I get 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 1 over 2 times 3. Ooh, I hear cooking in the kitchen. I think they're making something good. We better hurry up. Mrs. Strickler has to have dinner. Okay, back to this. Negative 5 squared is 25 minus 12 over 6. And we'll keep going. We get 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 6. If you had this answer for x on your paper, I would accept it. But I want you to be able to grade your homework. So we're going to make sure and use the calculator to do the square root of 13. So I've got 5 plus the square root of 13 over 6 and 5 minus the square root of 13 over 6. And the square root of 13 is about 3.6. And then I have 5 minus 3.6 over 6. So I get 8.6 over 6, and I get 1.4 over 6. And when I reduce that, I get 1.43 and 0.23. Those are my two answers for x. So go ahead and check that. Okay, I'm going to go back to my original color, which was blue, and we're going to do a word problem. Sorry, I don't have a picture this time. So I will just read it aloud. Let's see, what number are we on? We are on number 3. Okay, it says, for the period of 1971 to 2001, the number of films produced in the world can be modeled by this function. So let's write that down. So we have films in the world. So films made in the world from, well, I'm just having trouble writing, 1971 to 2001, so it's 30 years. Back to our equation, 10x squared minus 94x plus 3,900, okay? The question is, where x is the number of years since x equals the number of years since 1971, okay? So the question is, in what year were 4,200 films produced? That's the question. Okay, so basically what we want to know is, what is x? We're going to solve for x. So the answer is 4,200. That's for y. X is the number of years. Y is the number of films. So I'm going to take my equation and I'm going to put 4,200 in. And now I'm going to solve. So when I use the quadratic formula, I have to have 0. So I'm going to subtract my 4,200, and I get 10x squared minus 94x minus 300. So now I have my equation in the right form, and I'm going to put my numbers in for A, B, and C. I'm going to write down the quadratic formula. Do you have it memorized yet? There it is. So now I see negative b. So I've got 94 plus or minus the square root of 94 squared minus 4 times 10 times negative 300. Okay, over 2 times a, which is 2 times 10. Okay, I'll give you a moment to catch up with that. Okay, let's just finish up here. So I'm going to tell you some numbers. 94 squared is 8,836. And I've got a negative times a negative, that's a positive. 4 times 10 is 40, times 300 is 12,000 over 20. Okay, so this becomes 94 plus or minus the square root of 20,836. I just added those two numbers together over 20. Okay, that just happens to be 144. The square root of 20,836 is 144. So I have here 94 plus 144 over 20, and I have 94 minus 144 over 20. So, let's see, I'm going to add these two together. And let's see, 94 and 144 is 8, 238. And this is approximately 12. When I have a positive and a negative, I subtract. And I get 50, that's going to be negative 50 over 20. And this doesn't really matter. This is actually negative 2.5. But the question is, can I have a negative amount of years? Remember, going back up here, x is what? X is the number of years since 1971. Can I have negative years? No. So that won't work. So my answer is 12 years is X. But is that the question? The question is, in what year was 4,200 films produced? Well, my formula tells me X is the number of years from 1971. 12 years, that doesn't tell me what year it is, that tells me the number of years. So I have to add 12 to 1971 and I get 1983. So in 1983, there were 4,200 films made. So that goes back to the original. The answer is 1983. Now, why would you want to know this? I'm just telling you that there are a lot of people in the film industry that want to know how many films have been made in a 30-year period. That shows trends. It shows, in the industry, they want to know what factors cause films to be produced or not produced, and look at the past so they can project for the future. It's all very important. Math is very important in business. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys your homework. I think I already did that on the other video, but I'm going to write this down now anyway. Pages 674 and 675. 3 through 19 odds and 27. We're going to stop there. Hang on one second. I want to check one thing. Okay, you can do 27 and 43, and let's see, you can do 47 also. Okay, that's our first day of online schooling, and hopefully we'll have a video chat where we can go over any questions, and I'm always hoping to see you on Thursday. So have a great day and good luck. Love you all.